Okay, so it's 7:05 and I'll keep an eye on the waiting room, but I'd like to get started, and then when I see somebody join, I'll admit them. If it is someone, another board member, we'll pause and just officially open the meeting. I don't think we have any action items, so I think we can just start with our, well, I suppose that we won't approve our minutes, so we'll just go right to the heart of it, which is looking at our draft community engagement plan. And I first just wanted to say thank you. I really appreciate, this group has been meeting every other week, which is frequent for boards and for committees. And so I just really appreciate that you guys are putting in this time and effort. And you know, I'm reminded that we have done a lot together, and it's a really collaborative group. I really appreciate all of your input, and we have some of our harder work ahead. So thank you for hanging in there. Okay, Kristen is here. Hey, Kristen. So I will then call the meeting to order at 7:06 because we have a quorum. And I believe Don has agreed to take minutes for us. So is there any public comment? I don't think anyone is here other than the folks that are usually here. Okay, so we'll just move to, I love a motion to approve the minutes of our June 30th meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Andrew.
Second.
Great, thank you, Kristen.
Yep.
All those in favor of approving the minutes from June 30th, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. So the minutes are approved. So, and it looks like we've been joined by Liz as well. So I sent around a draft of the community engagement plan, and what I thought we could do, if you have that in front of you, if we could just take a little bit of time to look at that together. And before we dive into the specifics, I wanted to do a go around and get people's feedback, just initial reactions, things they like about this plan, and any concerns that you might have about it. Just like to get kind of your general vibe on what we're trying to accomplish for the fall. And in the top of the, on the top of the document, you can see what our purposes are. So I took the first stab at this. I shared it with Patrick, Don, Sue, and Kevin. So some folks have seen this already, but please, any feedback is welcome from the top to the bottom. So if we can just go around, and I'm going to call out your name, and if you need a little bit of time to digest, we'll come back to you. Let's see. So at the top of my screen is Sarah. So Sarah, would you like to go ahead and share?
I need more time with it.
Okay. Okay, so Kim is the next person on my list.
Hey, Krista.
And if you'd like, if it would be helpful, we can just take a few minutes for everyone to look at it together. Let's do that. I'll give you guys a few minutes to look at it. If you didn't get the chance to take a peek in advance, let me know if you can't see it.
I can't see it.
Okay, so Sal, would you like me to send you the link via chat or share it to you in your email? What's easiest for you? Or do you want me to share the screen?
What's the easiest way? You can share the screen if you want, but that kind of messes everyone else up a bit.
Not necessarily. I mean, I think we can do that. If that's the only way for you to be able to participate and see it, then let's do that.
All right.
Okay, so let's see.
I'm just not sure how to get a hold of it and not lose the screen. I'm not really sure how to do that.
Yeah. Okay, so let me pull it up. And can you see what I'm sharing?
Yes.
Okay.
Beautiful.
And I guess what I could do also while you're taking a minute to look at it is just walk through some of this with you. So we tried to identify what our purpose is for this work in the fall. And there are different goals that I think we have. We want to inform and educate the community. We want to also get a baseline. So we had done some surveying at the start of last fall to get a sense of how people were feeling about things going in the district. And this is a chance to check back in to see if that's stayed the same, changed. We'd like to use the opportunity to remind people about the core education values that came out of our work last fall. And then we'd like to solicit input on decisions that we need to make about the 2021-22 budget and the facilities plan. So the timeline is based on trying to maximize the November election period and kind of builds up to that with some education and informing, some surveying, and then giving people an opportunity to provide input.
Krista, just after looking at this quickly, but
Yes.
it looks like, you know, a great effort and timeline, and, you know, everything's paced quite nicely. I have a question as far as, I think surveys are going to be a great resource now to gather information from the community, maybe our best. And my question is just in August, how it says, how are people feeling about coming back to school? How does the timeline with that work with the output of information from the district on what school is going to look like? So is that, how are people feeling about going back to school just based on the state guidelines, or is that after we've received you know, direct messaging from the administration and the board or whomever's, you know, supposed to give that information out of what school is, we're expecting school to look like?
Yeah, and oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that's it. I think both in terms of the putting out information about what returning to school is going to look like, but also we'll be doing a survey of folks as well for various aspects of returning to try and gauge kind of where the community is and understanding how that's going to impact our reopening. So I do think there's a timing aspect to this that makes sense. We're probably looking at an early August dissemination of the plan for reopening, at least at a high level plan. There will still be a lot of details that need to get worked out, but trying to give folks as much a sense as we can about what reopening is going to look like in early August, so that they can you know, begin to get their heads wrapped around it and give us some valuable information to help us. So I think timing is going to be important in terms of overwhelming the community with surveys and overlapping the information on the surveys.
Yeah, I think we want to make sure not to flood people, because I talked about before, I think people are in a take care of basic needs mode, and I'm not sure how many people are in a forward-thinking mode about things other than basic needs, especially with children and thinking about school coming back. So I guess that's just sort of talks a little more about what you said, Patrick. I think people are kind of fragile, and how to not, you know, we don't want to put all this out and not really get a response. So I'm not sure. Those are just my thoughts about that.
Yeah, Christian, I hear the fragility, but and in the same breath with the fragility, I also hear people really wanting to know how best to make the decision of whether or not to send their kids to school, and if, you know, what that means for their work environment and everything else. So
Well, no, I agree. Right.
Yeah,
no,
I
I
can
agree
sense
with,
that there's real
right.
interest in just any school-related dialogue. Just, you know.
Yeah. No, I think people are yearning for that information about what's it going to be like for school. I was just saying, adding stuff to that, we want to be really careful not to do that, because the main important thing the district is doing is getting ready for school to start. So we don't want to deflect from that or confuse people or something. So I think we have to be careful. So I agree with you, Sarah, for sure.
I think it's also true that people want to be able to have some input as well. You know, I think in my experience in talking with families over the summer and through the spring, they've all been feeling sort of overwhelmed and like things are happening to them, and they really do want to have some kind of input. So I think, you know, having an opportunity to be part of a survey would be really important for families.
I was going to, oh, sorry.
Well, I
Go
was
ahead.
just gonna say, I think the other thing to keep in mind is there's a lot of people that don't have kids in the school. And that, you know, some of these other bigger issues are very pertinent to them. And we're already behind in terms of being able to engage the community around this conversation because of the pandemic. But it's really important that this conversation keeps moving forward for all those people that are in our 5 towns that don't have kids in the district, which I don't know what the percentage of that number is, but I think there's a huge percentage of people that aren't thinking about kids going back to school in the fall. They're thinking about paying their taxes, and they're thinking about what the budget's going to look like and how it's going to affect them financially.
Go ahead, Sal.
I've got an idea. Is it possible to create a dual survey that will be something that, hey, updates on the 2 major things we need to talk about in August, and then have it, you know, A and B, 2 different sort of surveys that cover those different things. So then everyone's kind of drawn into it.
I think they need to be separate, because I think the other one is so important for people with kids. And I hope that everyone in the community is concerned about that. I would hope that everyone would be supporting the kids and the families and things. But I think they should be separate, but that's just my opinion.
What are some other reactions folks have about that piece or the purpose or our approach?
I was just going to say the first thing that struck me on the first line, and I know that we've got the budget coming up, which is a big, huge deal, and the facilities. But I think one thing that is important to keep in mind is the fact that the purpose of engaging the community is sort of an ongoing conversation in addition to these big things. So if we don't keep engagement going at a level that keeps them engaged, I think coming in with all of a sudden these big things is going to be overwhelming, to get back to what people have been saying. And so, you know, there's a way for us to engage in the community that's, you know, positive and provide some upbeat information about things that are happening in the district during the summertime that will keep people engaged and keep them sort of tuned into what's happening in the school. And then these big engagement priorities come along as part of this overall plan, as opposed to sort of being these big, huge elephants that all of a sudden show up and people are like, whoa, you know, this is a big deal. So, so I think what's important to remember, and just one of the reasons I got involved in the beginning, you know, years ago when we did the 5-town learning community, was to really try to connect the school and the community generally, and that all of the other big decisions, if you're successful at connecting those 2 factions, the big conversations are going to ultimately be more successful because you have people's ear. So, so I would just always, the purpose of a fall engagement includes these big things, but the ongoing engagement and the ongoing keeping people apprised of what's happening and what the school decisions are and some of the great things that are happening is also really super important.
So I think the model we used last year we got more information out to the community than ever about the budget and whether people, through Front Porch Forum, through Facebook, and a lot of information before each meeting and then after each meeting, putting out what had happened at the budget meetings. So I think the model we used last year is already really good. In those monthly board highlights, I sent that to everyone before the meeting today, the one for June and July. We had a lot of those last year. That's a different format now for the last couple months. But what will happen is in about 2 weeks, I'm going to put all the past ones, give them to Jen, and she's going to put them up on the website. So you guys can look back at what we did last year and what we put out last year, which was quite a lot of information, including Patrick putting out all the incredible economic information and us putting out links to that almost constantly as they were coming up. So I'll let everyone know when that's all on the website, and then you can see what we put out last year and see if that was, I think it's adequate. It's just getting people to look at it. There's my dog. And certainly we didn't get the blowback at the March meeting, the yearly meeting that happened the year before when people felt like they didn't have enough information. So I feel like the board listened to people, put out a lot of information, and I feel like that was very positively taken in by the community. So just a comment about how we did it differently last year, and how that already was very, had a positive, the community was positive about that.
Nancy? I think you might be muted.
I'm sorry, I had to join a little bit late, but I'm
That's
just
okay.
wondering if someone could, I think that, is the question on the table to react to the document that's in front of us?
Yes.
Okay. And so, because the other information about what school's going to look like and so forth, I know that Patrick's got a team working on all that, and I'm sure they're thinking about best ways to convey that information and timing and whatnot. I think this looks like a great plan, and I think that the timing of the August piece, that August is a long month and it could happen any time. So I think this looks good.
I have a question as far as what is the appetite of the community and the administration and the facilities study that's ongoing to pursue, it doesn't seem like it's in the realm of possibility to pursue anything similar to the timeline that we had drafted months ago. But what is the appetite for facilities updates, plans for this committee and the administration? I'm curious about that because I'm curious how much that should weigh into our ongoing conversations.
What do you mean appetite, Sarah?
I mean, we had pretty much laid out the timeline saying like, we're hoping to vote on something in March, a plan that was going to be in place for how we should pursue the facilities within our district, and whether or not that would be another bond or, talking about how to most efficiently, capitalize on our resources here, or however we want to phrase it. And I'm just curious of where that conversation is right now, given COVID and, all the challenges with the budget, and what has seemed to me just a shift of focus. So I guess the question is appetite, or you could say like, what is the focus right now as far as facilities are concerned? And where does that play into the wider conversation throughout throughout the Community Engagement Committee's plan for engaging with the community?
Well, if I could answer, I mean, I think we found that there's no appetite for closing any of our schools. I'm not sure that there's appetite for reconfiguring the grades. And so I think, what I really think is that given the surplus that was reported in Kristen's piece that I just read today, I think the community will be looking for a reasonable budget, and it'll fall to the board to figure out what reasonable is. And I think that I don't see an appetite for anything different from that. I mean, I haven't seen it. I don't think we saw it in the results we got from the conversations we had. People are always concerned about taxes, and so I know the board will, and Patrick will do the best they can to present a reasonable budget.
So I think that, can you guys still hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, I've lost video now too as well. Anyway, I don't know if this was part of your question as well, Sarah, but you know, before COVID, we our plan was to take a pause around the facilities discussions while the consultants did their work, which is part of why this committee kind of shifted to thinking about, well, then, you know, before we could really shift to thinking about bringing together community members to talk about some of those issues that seemed out of the scope of the board, the pandemic hit. But that's kind of, I think, where we still are as far as our own work, which is this report is coming out, you know, in the next couple of months. But in the meantime, we are trying to get folks together around some of those other bigger conversations and map out a plan for when that report comes out. As far as but we have not, and I think this relates to Kim's point as well, I don't know that we've done a great job of reminding people that that is our plan. And to our credit, the pandemic hit. So that became the big focus. And it still probably is really the big focus. But I think also to Kim's point, you know, there is a lot of ways we can still engage people. I think the district did a great job with that around pandemic related responses. So I feel good about that. So I think our charge now is to kind of to get back out there, and I agree that we did a tremendous job sharing information. You know, this time last year, really building in a lot better plan for sharing information. But I think that's still on the sort of thin engagement end of things, something we should always be doing. But I think, well, it's important to figure out how to do some more of that thick, you know, getting the pulse of folks. You know, where are you at with these conversations, and what opportunities are there for people to provide input about whatever it is they've got going on. Most imperative for us is the budget and facilities conversation, but we probably should be open to whatever people feel like they want to talk about right now. But I'd love to hear if other people, this is great feedback and really great comments. I'd love to hear if Andrew or Liz, John, anybody else has anything to add to that, you know, reactions to this plan.
I guess if I could just interject for a second based on
Sure.
Sarah's comment. For me, the focus has temporarily shifted to COVID because that was an emergency that sort of presented itself that needed to be addressed. And there's still obviously a lot of work happening on that. But for me, really, my focus hasn't shifted away from building FY22. I mean, the conditions that were forecast that really created the need to start talking about facilities nothing has changed to improve those. If anything, there's been changes to make those challenges even greater challenges to overcome now. And depending on really how it all plays out, potentially speeds up the need to make some important and substantial decisions about how we spend our dollars in light of perhaps having fewer dollars. So Sarah, you've mentioned the reality, I think, of some families choosing to homeschool their students, their children. That's going to have an impact. Having to somehow make up for the lost revenue going into the ed fund, that's going to have an impact. Exactly what, how many dollars, and how is it going to be, repaid over time is unclear right now, but it's definitely going to have a negative impact at some point in time. So for me, it's still what was already feeling like a little bit of a perfect storm is even more so now. And I think as we continue the work on our long range planning, we can hopefully lean on that work to make some short-term decisions that may be necessary. So for me, that remains a critical community engagement aspect that that I think would greatly benefit the community if this committee continued to keep that conversation going. I'll add too that the timeline, it's sort of interesting. So we had a timeline set out that we were mostly able to adhere to. And then when we reached out to the consultants to help us with the study, with COVID and everything, they were originally talking about a November or December window in which they could get the report to us, which kind of threw our timeline way off. Since then, we've continued the conversation with them and we're able to get them information earlier than anticipated. And they're now going to have a draft plan for us in early August 1 specifically is the date they're shooting for. So I believe our prior timeline had the board reviewing the study at its retreat and thinking about how do we bring this information that we've now learned back out to the community and keep those conversations going. So it's worth taking a look again at that timeline to see, are we perhaps able to get back on track and target, we had looked at a March date to perhaps put some decision before the community. So that may be something that we still want to consider.
I just wonder if I could ask Patrick a question, and I hope this doesn't bring everyone off track, but I just am curious about your process for decision making about getting everybody back to school, and whether you are providing opportunities for the community to weigh in on any aspects of that.
So we actually have a steering committee meeting tomorrow, and part of the conversation is going to be what input do we need to collect from the community to inform decisions going forward. And there are some decisions that there's perhaps room for and others that aren't, right? So we have statewide guidance. There's some recommendations, there are some requirements. And we're looking regionally where there isn't requirement, where do we feel like we ought to be consistent? And then more locally thinking about Addison County, where do we need to be consistent since we share students with the Career Center? And then even beyond that, across our schools, what needs to be consistent, what has to be different. So there are many different layers, all of which have different levels of potential influence from the community. But we do need to reach out to the community to gather some information to inform sort of what returning to school might look like.
It seems to me that for this committee to continue to be credible, which I think you have been, that if there's a way to connect that conversation that you're having, Patrick, with your team, and have this committee help gather some of that input, I think it would help when the committee also wants to gather input about these other issues. Because then the committee's in a position where they are consistently helping the community have a voice in what matters, and bringing people back to school is so fraught right now, and that matters so much to people that I just wonder about trying to integrate that work with what this committee is doing.
And if I could just say something to that, I'm going to be part of the communications group planning for that kind of messaging that's going to go out around COVID, going back to school. And I thought about actually inviting Adora Fraser, who's the chair of that committee and the principal at Robinson, to join us tonight, or at least, the very least, share this plan. So anyway, I'm hopeful that there will be a lot of opportunity for us to communicate about being on the same page. How can we help each other? How can we frame this all in a way that is not duplicative or flooding people? You know, that it's well connected.
Thanks, Krista. I think that makes a lot of sense and feels very important.
So what I think would be really helpful is if we can bring as much feedback to this plan before it goes before the board at the retreat. You know, any other feedback folks have, these are some great notes, and I think will really help us to figure out what tweaks or changes need to be made before we share this with the board. What else do people think about this?
Well, what you've said, what Susan said, and what you've said, Krista, makes me wonder if it occurs to me that there is in fact, I had a community person was saying this to me today, that there probably is an intersection between COVID planning and facilities planning, especially around needing to have more kids, fewer kids in more spaces, and needing to have flexibility around use of space. And I wonder if, I don't know whether the facilities consultants are thinking about that, but I'm starting to hear that community people may be thinking about that and wondering about that. So I wonder if there's something to be said in our purpose around how the two things intersect.
And I guess I have to add the perspective. In Moncton, we've been having, I think I brought this up before, discussions about our town hall, which was voted on to do, and then people talking about financial strain and that aspect of the COVID problem. And so just adding the perspective that I don't think everyone in the community is saying that now we need to, you know, not look at facilities changes. Just in the Moncton community, there's a lot of discussion about how obviously school and personal finances are going to be much different going forward. So I just wanted to add that perspective. Also, I don't think that there is one perspective about any of that still, even though COVID has occurred.
And I was just going to add, based on Patrick's information about an August 1st timeline for the report, when I look at the facilities planning timeline, it looks like we can keep this. And maybe one thing to do which would make this timeline a little bit easier to read. I mean, there's two things, there's budget and facilities, and to maybe use a different color for each one. You know, separating them is going to is going to be important, just so people can kind of wrap their head around. Some people are very forward thinking and want to think about facilities, and some people, the budget is going to be a bigger priority. But the facilities timeline, to try to have something for a March community vote, seems like we can stay on track if we make sure that this timeline in this document dovetails with what we originally laid out. It's a little tricky to figure out what's a budget, you know, are we going to ask, is the survey going to have questions about budget and facilities in the same survey? Or, I don't know, it just seems like it gets a little bit unruly very quickly. But again, I'm just looking at this timeline for the facilities planning, and based on an August 1st report, we can, if we stick with this, we can meet that timeline, which I hear Patrick say is pretty important.
Well, I recall there was some conversation, I think, at our last meeting about, you know, Sarah mentioned earlier, what's the appetite, or, you know, we've talked about checking the pulse, et cetera, of the community for various things. And it's a little lower on the screen, I think, on this document, but there was some talk of another survey in November to try and gauge that appetite or check the pulse of the community heading into both budget season, but also in anticipation of any action that may or may not happen for March. I don't know where that fits into this conversation.
Kim, can I share the your media calendar?
Sure. And that's just a draft. At the last meeting, we had talked about having a calendar of outreach to the community so that there was some consistency and we could plan ahead, and that we were also hitting all the multiple channels between the website, the front porch forums, the social media, and then potential press releases to the Addison Independent, in addition to some of the meetings and things that we're doing. So I just put together, without seeing any of this or really knowing what this plan was. So it's not going to, again, it's just a draft, but yeah, feel free to share it.
Yeah, so it's on our agenda link, and you know, I'm just sharing it because I think we can take dates. The idea is one that I think goes really well with what our bird communication plan hopes that we will achieve, which is a really deliberate checking in with the community, and also goes along well with what Kristen's been doing, which is sharing out board highlights. And so so thank you to, and you guys have both been talking, Kristen and Kim, a little bit about this, and I think it's helpful for us to, whatever the look like. This also is a great thing. We share all board members to say, okay, you take this week, you take this week, and I think, and Kristen's done that with our front forum posts, but you know, just like this is how we can stay regularly in our community. So that those big decisions aren't coming out without already having a vision of communication and engagement.
I'm going to point out that the Did You Know was just an idea that I had about just some facts about our schools, our teachers, our students. And as I said, we've got a huge number of people in our 5 towns that aren't really connected to the school at all. And those are really, as we've always said, the people that we're trying desperately to engage. And by sharing out just some information about Like, did you know that there are X number of students in the ELP program this summer receiving services or lunches, the number of lunches? Or did you know one of our students is on Senator Leahy's coronavirus task force? Or, you know, there's a million things that we could put out that would be good news, history. Did you know Beeman Academy was built in, you know, 1772 or whatever it was, or 1524, you know, that I think would be of interest to people in the 5 towns. And it's just a little fact every week. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's not really inviting debate. It's really just information about our schools, our teachers, our students, and you know, some fun things and interesting things, a little bit of history, and a little bit of just community connection. So that's what the did you know on that timeline is.
I love that idea.
Of course, one of the tricky things is getting the information and, you know, where's all that information coming from? But it's, you know, and when I was thinking about it, I was like, well, if each school could come up with 5 facts of their school, just 5, you know, we've got 5 schools, 5 elementary schools and a high school. So that's 30, that gets us out 30 weeks of facts. If each school took 5 of those just little fun facts about their school. And that'll get us well into the fall and partially into through the winter as well.
Am I still breaking up?
Nope.
Okay. Kristen, can you just remind folks what you've been doing with the Front Porch Forum posts for the board highlights? Because I don't know if this group is aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing that more for the last year. And I think we started it about this time last year, moving up to the budget due to the community response that the year before they hadn't got enough information about the budget. And so we started those, and of course it included all board stuff, not just the budget. And now it's sort of in a more polished format. And we are doing that. And one board member in each town is disseminating that information on Front Porch Forum in Moncton. I also do it on Facebook because you have I think there's 780 people on that. And 900, almost 1,000 people and 780 households are on that. And I think more people actually pay attention to that in Moncton than Front Porch Forum. I think each town has its own style and its own ways to get information out. So I just checked because I posted that today, and there's already a couple of thumbs ups and some people saying, thank you so much. This is a great way to get information. Jennifer wants all the ones from last year so that she can put them up as like an archive. And so I'm like, wow, we did do a lot of those. So I'm a little busy at work for the next couple weeks, but so by August we'll get those up so people can look at what we did last year. And then, you know, each month getting different information out as Patrick and the administration get, especially in regards to the budget information out, which last year they got very granular about it and very, I mean, people were saying they really liked getting that much information last year. I don't think we had any complaints at all about the amount of information going out or the quality of it. So sort of following that, we'll keep doing that this year in that sort of even more polished look, and just trying to, I think it was Steve who said at the last meeting, well, wait a second, there's meeting minutes to every meeting we have. So this is just like a more digestible form, right? And we were like, yeah, it's a more digestible form because who wants to read the minutes? Because it's sort of brutal to read in a way. So, so just to make it more accessible. And then one thing I had to add is that on the new website, we had talked about having just a generic email so that people had questions for the school board. They could just click that and ask a question, and then we would figure out a way to deal with that. I mean, we look at Chittenden South and their website, and what they have that on their website. So we kind of copy them because they seem to be doing a really good job at communicating. So maybe at the board meeting, I'll suggest that we add that and then figure out who would then look at that and address those questions or that kind of thing. Just again, to make more of a dialogue like we've been trying to do than just a one-way communication stream. So yeah, those will come out after each board meeting. And last time we had wanted to have everyone have input into what should be on that, but as usual, we ran out of time and the meeting got really late. But a few people did give me a little input about that afterward. So again, it's much more than was happening before. And again, just getting it out to people and making sure they can see it and read it if they want. I know that after the last one, there were a lot of questions about a couple of topics, and I was able to say back on the Moncton Front Porch, Moncton Facebook page, I know this is a little bit boring, but if you read that, it answers all those questions, and then call me if you have any other questions about it. So certainly try to, Dawn and I try to be very visible in Moncton and be available to answer things that are appropriate to answer, and certainly refer people to Patrick if it's a kind of question that it needs to go to Patrick.
So I think that the plan that we come up with for the fall engagement and the, looking at a deliberate outreach around that will maybe have some overlap with, but also just expand on what we've been doing already with just keeping people on top of what's happening at board meetings in particular. We won't have a meeting again until after our board retreat and after the round table. So maybe what we can do is, if anybody has any other thoughts or concerns about this plan as it is right now, before we bring that to the board, let me know. You can email me. I think we'll try to find ways to address some of these. And maybe send it back out to this group before the board retreat. And that might be a good next step, since we won't be meeting between now and then. How does that sound? Thumbs up if people are okay with that plan for this. Okay, great. Okay, so the next thing on our agenda is to talk about the school community roundtable conversation and specifically the agenda. So I can share the screen for that again, if that's helpful. So I think I lost you guys. Let's see. Okay, can you see that? Is that visible to people?
No, it's not.
Nope.
Now it is.
Now it is. Okay. Okay. So you can see what our general purpose is, and the agenda, what the agenda is shaping up to look like. And Sue put this together and shared this with Patrick and Dawn and Kevin and I on our call last week. And so I wanted to share this with this group and see what feedback or thoughts people might have. And Sue, I didn't know if you wanted to hit any of the highlights for people. It's hard to see everyone when I'm sharing my screen, so I'm sorry. I'm going to try to figure out how to do it so I can. But
I mean, I'm just happy to talk through the overall, like, the purpose, so you all talked about this, and then I got it from Krista and Patrick, and so this was an attempt to capture kind of third hand people's hopes about what this meeting could be like. And so it sounded like people wanted the opportunity to have a pretty open conversation about what the 5 towns are facing, given just all that's happening in the world right now, and then just to explore some opportunities possibly for collaboration across the towns and the school and other sectors of the community to help the towns kind of walk through this moment in a good way. And so the agenda was, just starting, of course, with introductions, and this will be really important because you have people that are from different sectors of the community that you may not have engaged with before. And then a pretty open conversation about what the community is facing. And that part of the agenda really, I think, has people first talk about their own personal experiences and what they're facing, and then what stands out about what the community as a whole is facing. And then the third part was really an opportunity just for you all to share back with this more diverse group some of the things that you heard from the engagement work you did. And granted, those things are related to the schools, but those values could still be interesting, I think. And some of the places where the community had some energy around looking at ways to increase demographics and looking at school community partnerships, and also kind of doing some advocacy in the legislature. Those 3 things seem like they all lend themselves really well to possible opportunities for collaboration. So just to share some of that, and then after that have this kind of open brainstorming session where people are just thinking about, given where we are, how might we respond as a community? So that was the basic idea and flow of the agenda. So Krista, maybe it's good to pause and just see if people have any thoughts about the overall flow of the way that we tried to capture what people were hoping to do.
I have a quick question. Are we going to send the agenda to folks prior to them coming to the meeting?
I would encourage you to send this little abbreviated agenda that, I did a very fleshed out version below it. That's kind of for the people who facilitate the meeting, but I think this very abbreviated version would be helpful to send to people ahead of time.
Okay, I did talk to one of our town administrators, and he was interested in some background information about what this district was facing, and I sent him this communities working together to find a solution. This report after our when we did our community forum, just because he was unaware of the scenarios that are being considered for facilities, and kind of unaware of what the financial situation, like the way that this points it out. He was unclear about that. And so I'm wondering if we as a group might want to agree on what to send people. I've already invited everybody and asked people to call me if they had questions about the meeting, so I am getting some of those calls. But people are looking for some background and wondering how they can prepare. So I guess that would be what that would be a question to everybody.
So that's all on the website now, and if we could somehow direct people to the correct pages, everything is up there now, very easily accessible if you look, for me anyway, but I know where to look. So maybe we could give people a web page, like the budget page has all that. There's I think all that community engagement stuff is on there. I mean, I can look at it right now and see what I can find.
I'm wondering if it might be great to send a link to each of the important documents for people to have. So everybody's coming to the meeting with the same background information. So rather than sending people off to just look at the website, if we had a link and say, here's some important background information that you might want to take a look at prior to attending.
Right, I can do that right now in a few minutes. So I'll do that and make a list.
I wanted to say something about this, and since the second question on the agenda is what are we facing, I think that we're going to learn a lot from a lot of different people about what we're facing, and not just what the school district is facing. I think we need to make sure that we leave room for we're facing lots of things, not just the school budget stuff and that kind of thing. We need to look at so many things that we're facing. So I think we need to not act like we know what we're facing. I mean, what I mean is the school knows what the school is facing, but we're inviting a lot of other people and other things. They're faced with other things and they're thinking about other things. We need to make sure that's clear, that the school doesn't know everything about what the community's facing.
Right, and I think that, but some of them are asking for the information that we have. So I think if we provide that, that makes a lot of sense. So like I'm making the list right now, and I should just take a few minutes.
Yeah, I do think that is good when people ask, and just be sure to make sure people know this is what the schools, what the school's concerns are. And there will be lots of concerns, COVID is one, social justice things are one, climate is another. There's a lot of things that are going on.
I really like what you're saying, Sally. And I think in the part where the part of the agenda, what are we facing? I think it would be good to maybe say, this is what we've been hearing as a school district about what people care about and what matters, and maybe add a question in there that specifically asks other people in the community, what have you been hearing from the community? So that might be a way to balance that a little bit.
Right, and I think that there's, all of the inequities highlighted specifically by COVID, the intersectionality of, what people are facing with COVID and racial justice or injustice, and the economy, and it all overlaps and rolls into a really nice ball of chaos and challenges. But Sally, I appreciate your phrasing of that. And I was just recently at a training last week, and there were 3 questions asked of the group that I was with, and one of them, what are the inequities that COVID has highlighted? And then what does this mean for your work going forward in whatever sector you're in? So that could be, what does that mean for our work as a district? And then third question is, how are you going to not only work towards eliminating these inequities, but how are you going to stick with that work after this crisis has left us? So those could be, additional topics, or we'll probably end up somewhere in there during the conversation.
And I would almost add another question, and it's kind of in our purposes, and what opportunities are there for us, this collective community, to work together on those challenges, which is kind of the call to action that's bringing us to have this gathering. So we have to find a way, I think, to balance our challenges with those that everyone else brings to the table, at least at the start of the meeting.
Sarah, this is Sue. I really like, Sarah, those questions that you raised up, and I do think that that is what's on a lot of people's minds right now. And so I'm happy to try to incorporate some of that in here, because I do think, I mean, it's really important to provide the container that works for the context, right? And that is the moment that we're in. And so I think it's a little challenging right now to, try to make the container so big that everybody can weigh in and you're not directing it, but also creating a container that could lead to some potential action, right? Because if it's so big, it can just feel so overwhelming that you've had a conversation, but then there's not really clarity about what might happen next. So I think that's the balancing act to try to pull off.
I was just wondering if people are getting a pretty good response from the people that they've invited. Are we finding that there's an appetite for this kind of collaborative community conversation? From my point of view, the people I reached out to, I've heard from quite a few, and it sounds like some want to come to the meeting and have an in-person meeting, and some people want to do Zoom. So it's been good here in New Haven, but I was just curious what everybody else is finding.
I've had a little bit of a mixed response. I've had some yeses and a mix of in-person and Zoom. And then, well, I guess not mixed, I just haven't heard back from a couple of people.
I've heard back from 4 people. 3 of the 4 plan to attend, and 2 of those are in person and 1 Zoom.
And I think the other thing to keep in mind, just because this is how I think about things when I do them, is that when we look at who is going to attend, when we get the RSVPs, I think we want to put a little bit of flexibility into this, because we want to be talking to the audience of people that are there. So if we have mostly town planners that are attending, we might need to shift the conversation a little bit so that we can make it more appropriate for the work that they're doing. If we have select board people primarily, maybe we'll have a nice mix, which is the hope. But I think it might be important to just really take a look at the RSVPs, really figure out who's going to be there, and then make sure that whatever we're offering for this, because everybody's time is so precious, that we're going to make it worthwhile and it's going to be relevant to the people that are attending. So just to keep in mind who the people are that will be coming.
Another thing you might do, and this is work, so but I'll just suggest it. Once you get your RSVP list together, you could just send out a little survey with this brief agenda and ask people, why are you coming and what do you hope will happen? And then you could adjust the agenda a little bit based on what you hear back. One of the things that that I've been struggling with in this moment in my work with communities is that, we're in a moment where a lot of people think things are so kind of broken that it's a chance for a real kind of revolution. Like, we are going to just change everything. And then there are other people that are trying to kind of navigate and manage and improve the systems we have. And I think I'm really struggling with how to kind of navigate that tension, but I kind of hear a little undercurrent of that in this conversation. And I think, where you land on that partly sometimes has to do with your role, right? So, speaking to who the audience is and who may show up, if you have a lot of people with official kind of positions in the room, then they may be more kind of trying to figure out how we're going to shift what we're doing and navigate this situation. And then if you have people in the room with less formal leadership roles, they might be thinking much more expansively about what's possible and what this moment kind of asks of us. So I just think that that tension is really present in all of our public conversations right now, and just being aware of who's coming and where they may be on that, and being prepared to kind of navigate that feels important.
Are there other thoughts or comments people want to make about the agenda? Or questions, ponderings? When I share the screen, I can't see everybody, so I'm going to stop sharing. And hopefully you can access the agenda. Oh, there you all are. Hopefully you can access it from the from our meeting agenda. Okay, so quiet group, but thank you for this feedback. And I guess one thing I wanted to share that we are trying to figure out the facilitation piece. It seems like it would be great to have facilitation from within our community. I think the idea with all of our work with a consultant is to kind of build the capacity within your organization or your community. But there's a challenge with facilitating if you're really close to the work. So we're trying to see if we can identify someone in the community that might be a good kind of moderator for us, and then walk us through the flow of the questions and ensure people are participating. We're going to also have Zoom help from the principal of Mount Abe, Shannon Warden, so she can help with facilitating the tech piece, which I think will be really important. But we haven't yet identified. We've a couple of different ideas of people that have not been on the committee all along, but might be able to serve in that capacity. And then at different points in the conversation at the round table, the input that Patrick can provide or that any one of us can provide to frame the conversation will be really helpful. So that's kind of our initial thinking around how to facilitate this. But we don't yet have anybody identified. So I think if there isn't any more feedback on the agenda, maybe I'll do a quick round robin to just check in and see how everybody's doing with digesting all of this. And anything else anybody wants to share before we close for the evening? So I'll start with Sarah, who's at the top of my screen again.
No, this looks great. I mean, I haven't been to a community engagement meeting for a few weeks, so you guys have been doing a ton of work, and I'm really curious to see who's going to come to the roundtable. And like Sue said, I think that'll kind of dictate how the conversation is framed. I just forwarded you an email, Krista, that I got from one of our select board members in Lincoln, and he responded to Rob's invitation to the roundtable. He said he will come to it, which is great. But his concern was the share of taxes that Lincoln as a town is going to have to pay to the district. So that just kind of is a good example of how he wants to frame the conversation. And but yeah, the great work, and thank you guys so much.
Okay, thank you. Sally? I think you're muted still.
I'm really excited about people of the community coming together. This really makes me happy. And I want to just be open to the different possible connections that will grow out of this. And that's what I'm most interested in, is just seeing the possibility of relationships and trust, building some trust, so that we have years to work on stuff. I mean, we have things to do right away, but let's look at the long haul and start coming together, is what I feel like.
Thank you. Nancy?
I also think it looks good. I'm excited about the work. I put in the chat some my earnest hope that we'll leave the meeting with some groups of people who've gathered around specific topics that they're committing to take action on, or that they might commit to take action on. I think it's important that this end up with actions that people can take going forward. And I haven't invited anyone yet, and I realize I've really got to get going to do that.
Thank you. Okay, Kristen. I think you're muted.
Yeah, I'm still working on that list, but I'll email it to everybody in a couple minutes, just the pullouts from the website. It's up there as a file on the chat, but I'll email it to everybody, and
Thank you.
people can find the information. No, I think this is great, and it looks good. And thank you, Krista, for all that you've done. It's quite a lot of work, and everybody that's done quite a lot of work.
Okay, thank you. Elizabeth.
Hi. I too, like Sarah, haven't been in attendance at the last couple of meetings when a lot of this work has happened. Just hearing about it, though, in kind of echoing what Sally said too, it seems very exciting to bring different people together to really be thinking about ideas. I think, though, like kind of coming into it without having been a part of the planning, I'm also thinking about some of the ideas that were talked about, just like that, there's just a lot of directions this conversation could go, and it'll just be interesting to see how it plays out, like how it focuses in, and what comes out of it. But I do think just bringing a diverse group of people together is a nice idea.
Okay, Kim.
It's all pretty exciting, and I think for the roundtable, one of the things that I had put on that communication list was a press release about the fact that this was happening, which I think might help for people that haven't RSVP'd. It might generate, a reminder for them, and also show some collective energy about the fact that it's happening. So is there somebody that's doing a press release for this?
Not yet.
District? do you want me to take a stab at it and send it to you, and then we can get it to the paper?
That would be fantastic.
Okay. All right. I'll use, just based on the agenda and what the conversation that we had tonight, I'll put together that press release. And I think the
Thank
more people know about what's going on, we're inviting specific people from each town, but everybody should know that we're doing this. So, that's what I would love to see, and I'm happy to help make it happen.
Awesome. Thank you. Patrick.
I see Nancy had her hand up.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
You go ahead. I just have a question about an email address I need. So you go ahead, Patrick.
Okay.
Yeah, I think like other folks, I'm seeing a lot of exciting possibilities that could come about from this. And I think we've also identified some challenges that lie ahead. I think the challenge with that combination of many exciting possibilities and numerous challenges is, especially with a finite number of people here, being able to somehow take all of the energy and also focus it in a really directed way, even though there are many different directions we could go. So I feel like we perhaps run the risk of everything being the priority, which makes nothing the priority. And then I'm concerned about the action-oriented aspect of this that has been a thread since that Saturday at Bristol Elementary School's cafeteria. And I think it's important that we don't lose that action-oriented aspect.
Thank you. Darla.
Again, it's I'll say what others have said. I've been away for a couple of meetings, and to come back and see all of this work is tremendous. So thank you for all of that. I'm excited about the roundtable. The idea of bringing different communities together and have a singular discussion, I think, is really unique, and something that is going to give you a tremendous amount of information all at once. I think I'm very excited about that. I'm also excited to participate as a select board member. I'll wear a different hat that night, but I'm looking forward to it very much. So again, thank you for all your work. I also agree with Patrick about making sure that when we leave there, we've got a clear direction that we're headed in, and not 15 directions. While everything is important on one level or another, finding that topic that means the most to folks and being able to zero in will be very important as well.
Thank you. Liz?
My thoughts are that action-oriented, I think that it would be possible that everybody could decide on certain things that are important to them. I think the challenge is usually how do you address that problem and the different ideas about how to address it. We can agree that something's an issue, but how the way in which you go about addressing it, I think, could look really different from different people. For what Sarah said about the feedback that you got from your select board member, I think it was, sounds like maybe some background information on Act 46 could go a long way for them, as we've been sharing the tax burden far before we consolidated as a district. That was already something that was happening. So that could be helpful. And I'm hoping that, do you think that we can do the short preview survey with the agenda? Is that something you think we could do?
Thank you. Yeah, that idea was definitely captured. So I think we should consider if we can make that work. Don, do you have anything you want to add from behind the notes and the minutes?
When you push your space bar and you're taking minutes, you don't get to talk. You just get further on the page. So thank you to everybody for the continued work, and I'm just going to keep catching up on the minutes.
Okay. Okay, I did want to just say one thing about the next steps piece. You know, I think we've talked about how the board can't really own that piece, but you know, one thing we this group could probably do is agree to reach back out to folks after the roundtable, depending on what bubbles up, and see if anybody from within this group or those attendees kind of are naturally interested in aligning in certain directions. But we will probably be needing to look for folks who are really compelled toward a particular focus to want to step up and herd that that gathering after this initial convening. So, you know, I think that's something that we'll have to figure out as we go. I don't think we want to convene this and then entirely drop it, but we don't really have the capacity to continue to move it along past the convening. Sally.
Krista, one of the things I was thinking of is once it comes to the end, maybe it would be a part of number 5, next steps. Once you've seen how many different ideas have come up, some people could think about, okay, who else should be asked to come to this conversation if there was a conversation? Yeah. So then we bring more people in who are appropriate and relevant for that, and then for that, and for that. So we build kind of energy that way, and then other people can let go of it because now there are more people working on something else.
Nice cat, Patrick.
It's not like we all.
The
Yeah, and
downside
I
of not
think
being in the office.
Look at that. And I think in the explore next steps part of the agenda, that is really where we can hopefully build enough, you know, seed planting to, you know, to go back and look and see where action can emerge.
I think one other thing is when people come together and we start seeing that we have similar concerns, that's going to build some energy. You know, like people are going to, I think, really appreciate that so many other people are thinking about these different things. And, you know, we're like talking about real things, and that's going to feel good and energize us, I think.
Sally, I want to just jump in because I think what you just said is really important. And I hear a lot of interest in the call on getting to action from this meeting. From my perspective, if you were having a meeting about gathering input about facilities or something, I think it's really important to, like, you know, be really clear about how you're going to incorporate that input, or have action around, you know, how to come together again in the fall. But with this, to me, this feels like a very generative meeting. You know, it's the first time people maybe are coming together with a lot of diverse interests. So from my perspective, what seems most important is people understanding what the common concerns are. Because like you said, Sally, I think that can create enough energy for people to want to come back together and do some work together. And especially if you're in a convening role and you're not in the ownership of the work role, then I think from my perspective, it's a little less important to have a clear set of actions and more important to have some clear priorities that people have identified. And I just want to say really quick, you know, I've been working really closely with Krista. I wasn't really aware of all the fantastic work that Kim is doing and that Kristen is doing. And I'm just really impressed with what this, you know, kind of hybrid board community group together is accomplishing. And I think it's great. It's a great model. And I really appreciate all that you're doing.
Okay, so anything else before we close? Oh, Nancy, go ahead.
Can someone just give me Kevin Harper's email address? Does anyone have it? Or I don't even know the name.
I probably do. Hold on.
I'm going to sign off, everyone. Goodbye. It was good to see you all. Take care.
Thanks, Susan.
Thank you, Sue.
You, Susan.
Thank you.
I think it's Kevin@bristolworks.
Yep, .org. That's what I have.
Thank you.
Anything else, public comment wise? Anything else on anybody's mind?
Krista, I just had this
Yeah.
one thought, and it was really, Sue already left the meeting, but when she just was talking about that, this group, finding those common interests, it did make me think about, the approach we take when doing our bargaining as for teachers contract around the critical issues bargaining. I've often felt like that whole approach could be used in so many different venues, really, because it's so much about identifying your commonalities, and then how do you get there. And I know that's exactly what you're going for, but I just thought I would throw that idea out there too, that I think it just could be a good approach, and I think it helps to give some definition too to a process that can feel very wide open. And so just wanted to mention that.
Yep.
Go, Nance.
Sorry, one other question. What's the plan for finding the person to lead the meeting on the 29th? Or did I misunderstand? Is there already some?
I mean, I was going to reach out to Phoebe Barash as somebody who has done some of the community engagement stuff with us, is a mediator, but she hasn't been, intimately involved recently. I don't know what she'll say, and it's been on my list to reach out to her for a few days now. But if anybody knows anybody else, like, maybe along those lines, that would be great. Open to suggestions.
We had Nancy.
Yannette.
Nancy. Yeah, that's who I was going to say.
Nancy.
Yep.
Nancy Yannette, and I don't know if Adora is available, but she's an excellent facilitator. She's one of the best.
Okay.
Dora's planning on attending.
She is. That would take her opportunity away from being a participant.
I think it'd be better to have someone not from the schools facilitating, because that might give people an impression about what it's about or something that is incorrect.
Well, Adora would be very clear about that with people. There wouldn't be any doubt. There wouldn't be any doubt. That wouldn't be an obstacle for her facilitating.
But it would mean she couldn't participate.
Right.
In that.
I wonder what about Peg Sutliff? She might be. I've been in some meetings with her. She's pretty good.
Great.
I take it Sue can't do it or isn't willing to do it.
She said she would if we really wanted her to, but I think, kind of this idea of what, she's mentioned this all along, that the goal is really that we identify people in the community who can serve in these different roles, really build out our capacity, and find different ways for people to be involved. And so, I think that's what we're going to try. And I suppose if we get really stuck, and she also said if we couldn't find somebody, she could provide a lot of coaching to any one of us. But we'll see how we do with asking some other folks first. And these are great suggestions. If anybody has any others, please let me know.
Okay.
There goes a cat tail.
There's a cat.
Another idea is maybe have a few different people facilitate a portion of it so they don't feel overwhelmed by doing it.
Right.
And they
and
and they can participate.
Right. Yep. There are, I think, different points in the agenda where it would be good to have, maybe Patrick offering his perspective of the school-based school-based challenges, maybe one of us talking about our goals for convening this based on the work we did in the fall. But then, someone who can kind of work the room
Dueling
make the
cats.
moves.
Woo.
Yeah, what is your cat doing on the 29th?
So another thing to consider is that when you have a meeting and there's people on Zoom and people in the room, you almost have to have two facilitators. One
Right.
person paying attention
Yep.
to the people on Zoom. I learned that from my daughter's college courses. So
Yep.
so there,
Yeah,
there
so
might need to be
Shannon-
someone focused on the Zoom, and if people
Yep.
are raising their hand, and then
Yep.
someone in the room, and them kind of working together.
Right. Yeah, I think Shannon Warden is going to serve in that role for us, which is great.
And
Pat.
Krista, are we going to provide masks or face shields for the participants?
I suppose we could. I don't know. We didn't talk about that. We know we're going to require people to have them, but if that's something that seems like a good idea. What have you guys done that before, Patrick, with meetings that you've convened? It's pretty easy.
Yeah, we haven't had very many in-person meetings. We're having one tomorrow, but I just asked people to bring a mask. I think it's pretty common that everyone has their own mask. I think most people actually prefer their own. But we can certainly we have some disposable masks on hand that we could just have at the ready for someone if they didn't bring one.
Yeah, that might not be a bad idea. They're pretty easy to get now.
We have a few thousand in stock right now, so we can bring a few.
Okay.
And those,
Oh, I think we lost you. Go ahead, Sal.
disposable, so people can use them more. You can even wash them. I was just going to say, instead of, I don't know exactly what masks you have, but they're not necessarily disposable. Those ones that are like surgical masks, they look kind of papery. Those things can be used over and over, and they can be washed gently with soap. So no sense having people throw them away if they can use them again.
Unless you're my son wearing them to mountain bike camp. Okay. Anything else? Kim, you look like you're on a sailboat with the wind whipping through your hair.
I have a fan right in front of me. I'm upstairs. So I wish I was on a sailboat. It's virtual. It's sort of a virtual experience.
The virtual sailboat.
Virtual sailboat. That's right. Okay, so I guess then we will just get a motion from the board members that are here to adjourn. And thank you guys all so much. And we'll probably come back with, the community engagement plan for the fall that's been incorporated in the feedback that you've offered. We'll share that back out with everybody before the board retreat, so you can see that before that moves forward. So let's see, Liz or Kristen, if I could get a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Okay, thank you, Liz.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you guys so much. Everybody have a great night. We'll talk soon.
You too,
Thank you, Krista.
You too, Krista. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.